Gentlemen, today we ain't doing power scaling, no. Welcome back to a brand new series for this channel, Team Scaling. The series where I pick a specific concept, theme or trope and I analyze how different franchises and mediums handle it in their own different ways. From the worst to the best, east versus west, maybe 2, maybe 3, but if you like and subscribe either way, that works for me. In today's episode, Man of Steel, World of Cardboard. Sometimes a character is powerful, like really powerful. So powerful in fact that you really gotta think or wait for conflict to even exist with these guys around. Maybe they have an emotionally driven mental block. Maybe the OP fella simply fights stronger and stronger opponents as the story goes on. Maybe the story is about trying to prevent a villain from reaching that all-powerful state, instead of that being the status quo. Maybe being the most powerful is the status quo, a concept that can take both a comedic or philosophical direction. Or maybe you strike the seemingly non-strikeable guy right in the heartstrings.
Satoru. Long time no see.
It's really him.
Stop me if you hear this one. Superman is too boring and OP to have any meaningful challenges. This notion has been haunting the character as far back as the early 2000s, which wasn't exactly helped by sillier takes on the character always giving him new powers depending on what the plot needed. Some iterations try to quote-unquote solve this problem by grounding Superman's power set, making him less powerful overall, mostly on the animated side of things, interesting enough, which does fall in line with the less silly direction the character took in the post-Crisis era. Check out this video I did for more on that. And to tell you the truth, I'm not exactly head over heels for iterations where Superman is indeed pretty much omnipotent, as in bypassing entire concepts and sucking any fun out of power scaling debates. But I also don't think that nerfing Superman is the only way to give him a challenge, because I happen to believe that there is a mountain of challenges a character can face that cannot be solved by pure power alone, like the 3 examples we'll go over today. These characters may be indestructible, but the world around them sure ain't. Like and subscribe to keep this series going, and let's get it. Here I am once again talking positively about the Zack Snyder Superman movies. I have made somewhat of an infamous reputation here and on Twitter for not jumping on the whole quote Zack Snyder hates superheroes and altruism and puppies and rainbows thingy. Hell, I even have a series specifically made to debunk the various myths and misconceptions that surround those films. His work is not for everybody, which is fair, but it also means that defending it will always be kind of a gamble. Hey, speaking of chances, did you know? To believe in hope means to believe in chances. Because what hope really is the belief in something beneficial happening despite having no solid proof beyond that belief. And despite many still feverishly insisting the opposite, Zack Snyder's Superman very much does embody the concept of hope. Just less in the smile and talk about how good things can be way, and more so in the actively fight to make things better type of way. I know the latter sounds more aggressive, but that's kinda the DNA Superman was created into, debuting into action comics by smashing the cars of evildoers and eating domestic abusers to walls. A champion of the oppressed, created to give the oppressors a taste of their own medicine. But nowadays, the latest reference to that iconic green car scene, aka Superman Lois pilot episode, has the character gently put it down after saving it, which got praised to death despite being a kid's glove version of the actual scene. Meanwhile, Superman pummeling the crap out of essentially the second space Hitler that he meets in Zack Snyder's Superman's films was met by active backlash, calling him all sorts of names like evil, asshole, joke, dude bro, zero hope, and like, no. But unlike some fellow Zack Snyder fans, I'm not here to tell you that quote Superman is not Superman unless he beats up someone with scale laser beams, since I find that just as silly as saying Superman is not Superman unless he stops to chat with a kid about the weather. The character is and has always been more nuanced and three-dimensional than either the old school brawler or the modern therapy puppy is being portrayed as over the years. One thing I can safely call true for most situations though is the fact that he is not perfect. Even outside his golden age self, he's been proven to be brash, impulsive, and even hot-headed at times, which, in my opinion, are perfectly logical traits for his character to have, especially after a lifetime of holding back your strength due to the sheer terror of hurting your loved ones, which in Superman's case it's everyone. All that pent-up anger isn't just gonna be safely transferred to the Phantom Zone, you know?
I feel like I live in a world made of cardboard, always taking constant care not to break something, to break someone, or someone could die, but you can take it, can't you, big man?
Nowadays the character is usually portrayed as chillax as it gets, but that's because he went through all those challenges throughout his history, and stories have since shifted to be about the type of change he brings to the world rather than the world brings to him. Even with that in mind though, there are still characters smarter, faster, more creative or more skilled than him. There are still limits to the stuff he can do most of the time, which finally brings us into the trial of Superman in Batman v Superman. Long story short, Lex Luthor arranges things so that Superman, which many see as a representation of America in universe, inadvertently causes a mass shooting in the middle of an international conflict, just by showing up. Had carbonized bodies so it looks like he may or may not use laser beams in ways not protected by sunscreen, and Senator Finch is understandably in search for answers over what happened. So after a talk with his mom, and while Lois Lane tries to unravel Lex Luthor's schemes behind the scenes, Superman decides to show up to testify for a crime he didn't do, wanting to believe in the due process and respecting the system so much that he enters the building like any other normal man would, opening and closing the small door instead of flying over it, and even waits to be addressed before talking. To me, this whole sequence perfectly displays the humbleness of Superman's character without even the need of a single word. On the topic of silence, however, Lex Luthor is suspiciously missing. That's because behind the scenes he's been manipulating Wallace Keith, a victim of the Black Zero event from the previous film, one that Superman failed to save for circumstances beyond his control. Something Powerplex before Powerplex. Anywho, Lex, in a seeming act of charity, gives Wallace a brand new wheelchair and convinces him to testify against Superman. This wheelchair, mind you, is covered in lead, the one thing Superman's X-ray sight cannot see through, because it blocks radiation and stuff. And it's far from the only secret feature Lex was coy about. Taking literally everyone by surprise, the bomb goes off, killing every single person inside that room except one, who was instead sentenced to survive. Man, my writing is off the charts today. Clark later tries to do the best he can by helping with the search and rescue, but he can't shake off the feeling that he's in the way. Worse yet, all the death, suffering and literal body bags he's surrounded by, especially with the knowledge that they were all there because of him, is just too much for Clark to mentally handle, as he flees the scene. Lois, with still respect for Clark's turmoil, tries to comfort him with the fact that he had no actual way of preventing this, but all Clark can think about is how he didn't even think that someone could ever do something like this.
I didn't see it, Lo. Standing right there and I didn't see it.
Clark, there are people behind this.
I'm afraid I didn't see it because I wasn't looking.
And he feels as if his quote, being Superman simply brings more harm than good to others, so he self-exiles himself to the mountains for a while. Meanwhile, the media scrambles in trying to understand what happened. Was Superman aware of this? If so, why didn't he stop it? People are still people, and super speedy beings have to be careful while moving them around. So it's even more stupid to expect Superman to pull a Quicksilver and all those people doing these scenes. That said though, whether it's inside or outside these films, sparking doubt on whether Superman's goodness and powerfulness really do come in equal portions is exactly what Lex Luthor was trying to do, since his motive in this film is basically to destroy the idea that there can be a benevolent God figure, because God didn't save him from his father. So he tries to either destroy Superman's image or kill him directly, no matter who gets caught in the way. Clark imagines what his father would say and decides to return back to the Cape after realizing that just because sometimes good actions have bad consequences, that doesn't mean good isn't something worth pursuing. A conclusion is solidified by his sacrifice at the end of the film. Batman v Superman in general puts Superman in a position where, unlike the previous film, he can't really super strength or laserize his way out of stuff like public reception, media narratives, religious framing or philosophical debates. Just remind us that Clark can change many things except human nature. It's up there as my favorite comic book movie of all time, and I definitely suggest giving it a second watch if you wanna ease off the bandwagon a bit. Well, maybe fate willed it so that you haven't even seen this movie yet. In that case, check the Ultimate Edition, it's a better version. Speaking of trying out new things after the first few attempts didn't go too well, the anime ReZero is about a Japanese teenager, Subaru Natsuki, who gets sucked into another world. One where he gains the power to rewind time every time he dies, with a small little caveat that he can't decide where the checkpoint is. Even then, with a reset button always being nearby, this series is not afraid to kill, torture, and downright maim anyone who is or isn't named Subaru Natsuki. Except for one. Meet Reinhard. Reinhard is basically the comically overpowered noble hero that in most other anime of this genre, the isekai one, he would be the protagonist, but not here. I mean, not in the context of screen time or narrative importance, but he has so many powers, or divine protections, that he basically is the chosen one of this setting. To name a few, Reinhard can read minds, dodge any and all projectiles, come back from the dead, resist any and all elemental attacks, poisons or diseases, get more powerful the more blood he sheds, whatever kind of ridiculous force is even able to accomplish that, walk on clouds, master any weapon he touches, or hand-to-hand combat for that matter, is an expert cook, and to top it all off, he can give himself random blessings to further expand his list.
My divine protection of telepathy lets my voice reach anyone I choose who's within sight. How many superhuman powers do you have?
Now, it's extremely important to note that for all these blessings, Reinhard cannot be everywhere at once. Sure thing, he can pretty much eliminate any obstacle in the story if he could, but because of his usefulness and role as a knight, most of the time he's always somewhere else or the situation is too low-key for him to know anything about it. He's not omniscient either. Worst of all, he can't rewind time and save those he failed to save. A sentiment that is constantly echoed by other characters in ReZero towards Reinhard goes as follows: "You are a hero, Reinhard, and a hero is all you can be." And thus our beloved time rewinding protagonist Subaru often has to come up with solutions to his own problems, juggling between finding new allies, managing the ones he already has, and using all of his arguably infinite lives to rescue the ones he loves. Tragically, it's implied that Subaru is kinda the closest thing Reinhard even has to a friend. Subaru's curse makes it so that he can't even talk about time rewinding shenanigans, so in a way, their powers kinda isolate them both from others. Less tragically, however, these two work extremely well together, with Reinhard's power to solve almost all his problems and Subaru's lack of physical power translating into him having to rely on his allies to get things done. They combine together like a glove, brains and brawn, you know? The contrast, however, also means that Subaru can basically peek into other timelines to see which path to take and which to avoid, preventing the demise of many, whereas Reinhard can only really show up after the initial threat did, regardless of who already died or not. They may be able to protect everyone, but Reinhard cannot save everyone, despite being a hero. I mean, he's a knight. He slays monsters at the day he's saved, right? It doesn't matter if the monster in question is a resurrected corpse of his grandma. As far as he's concerned, he's just a mindless soldier brought back by enemy forces, so he needs to slice it down, right? Unfortunately, doing so also ends up cutting ties with his grandfather permanently. I'm afraid that no divine blessing can save him from this one. As you may or may have not noticed, despite the list from earlier, Reinhard is kinda all brute force. Sure, the physically strongest swordsman in the setting, and basically a walking nuke in terms of sheer power. But ironically for the verse he's in, him and magic don't go together well. For one, he cannot cast magic spells as his mere presence actively absorbs mana, meaning that he can't even work alongside his allies without cancelling their own magical power. And thus, when the enemy carries abilities that are a little too complex and hits really hard, things get tricky. Okay, so we have this chick called Sirius. In case you're asking whether she's naked underneath those bandages, you're not the first person to ask that, who has the power to link herself to other people with a hypnotizing emotional power, overwhelming them to the point of killing them, which Subaru himself finds out in extremely painful fashion. After respawning and with only 15 minutes to work in, Subaru calls out Reinhard, who is successful when it comes to killing Sirius, but also inadvertently kills everyone she linked herself to, much to his shock. Speaking to my fellow Death Battle fans, remember the ending conclusion of Gojo vs Makima? It's basically that. Reinhard is obviously unarmed and wins the fight pretty easily, but as far as this timeline is concerned, he now has to live with all of these people as collateral damage caused by his end, despite slaying the villain, because after all he's a hero, and a hero is all he can be. And thus, on attempt number 3, Subaru finds out that the best possible route is ironically the one where his beloved Emilia gets kidnapped by ReZero equivalent of Super Senior Gojo, Regulus. This guy can basically stop time around his body so that he's invincible, and stop time around other things so that anything he touches becomes an unstoppable bullet. On one end, since this bends physics entirely, Regulus is one of the extremely few able to harm and even kill Reinhard. Don't worry, it got better. But on the other end, Reinhard can still throw him around with no problem, kick him across the city, ride him like a surfboard, and such. When Regulus has had enough and decides to yeet Reinhard into space, however, the latter thankfully just lands on the moon and just jumps right back, as you do. And right on time to deliver some satisfying blows as Subaru and Emilia finish figuring out how to undo his convoluted powers, in ways I don't feel like going over or spoiling. So despite not being the one to save the day per se, Reinhard still proves himself to be an invaluable asset for the heroes that night. Speaking of multiple heroes in one place, Ben 10 has always been my favorite non-comic book derivative superhero, which is ironic because between the many sci-fi tropes, in-universe reboots, and stories that range anywhere between downright silly to maturely dark, the franchise ironically happens to be a better adaptation of the comic book medium than most comic book adaptations really. You probably know the drill with this kid, his device and the secrets that it did. Thousands and thousands of DNA samples from across the universe equals a vast assortment of superheroes to pick from. Mastering strength, speed, the elements, time, well, reality itself. But as weird as this may sound for a self-proclaimed power-scaling channel, I don't really think that Ben 10's charm comes from how many galaxies Alien X can blink out of existence or not, but from the sheer versatility and creativity Ben can channel in order to solve these problems. Maybe too much creativity, because unfortunately for most of Ben 10's situations, writers always have to nerf him by either giving him the wrong transformation, breaking the Omnitrix, or reverting Ben's maturity to his 10-year-old self whenever he seemingly develops too much as a person. And it's a tough pill to swallow guys, but when it comes to choosing between the most versatile aliens or the ones who punch the hardest, 10 times out of 11 Ben will pick the latter. But even Ben recognizes that, when lives are at stake, there are problems he just can't punch his way out of. Omniverse, despite the silly tone, showcased this twice surprisingly. Once the incursions fill the planet with Locustars, they threaten to make them go berserk across civilization unless Ben were to surrender and imprison himself in a satellite. Despite Ben's protest, he ultimately realizes that this is a battle he's gotta lose if he wants to save as many lives as possible, because much like a certain knight, he cannot be everywhere at once. It's via cooperation with his allies and clever disguising that the heroes managed to turn the tide in this war. The best episode that plays with the concept of you can't just humongousario your way out of problems is A Jolt from the Past, in which what seemed to be an annoying foe from Ben's childhood returning to cause more hijinks is actually secretly begging for help, as Fistwick is secretly using megawatts as literal living batteries, even battling Ben while using them as sad energy source, like a human shield. This means that, despite currently dealing with a C-level villain, Ben cannot simply go for brute force or sheer power in this scenario without accidentally hurting the megawatts, which is really sweet as it ties into him wanting to protect all life forms. In Ben 10, usually challenges are created by either making Ben stupid, breaking the watch, which nowadays happen here, or mistransforming. which does happen here, but it works because there's a pretty great introduction to a pretty awesome alien. In a scene that I think it beautifully captures the charm of Ben 10, we see Ben trying to figure out and learn about Gravitack's gravity powers, working alongside his partner Luke with such newfound trust that it results in Fistwick getting a karmic mouthful of his own missiles, plus the megawatts happily accepting to be used as consenting energy sources for Undertown. This whole final scene, and frankly approach to Ben in general in this episode, serves as a perfect reminder that you don't have to necessarily nerf a powerful character for there to be a challenge. Just offer challenges where the most straightforward approach simply doesn't work for once. I clearly picked the most optimistic example out of the three for last, to end on a positive note, but there is one core element that binds all three stories together. And it is beautiful as it is kinda sappy. Love, trust, and cooperation. Superman can't punch his way out of every problem, but he does have people in his heart that further push his never-ending battle to defend the defenseless. Reinhard could potentially slay each and every monster he comes across, but it's only by working alongside allies that cover his few but significant blind spots that saving everyone becomes feasible. And Ben may be unable to alien X his way out of every problem, for both factors inside or outside his control, but by adapting to the situation and cooperating with his friends and family, we're reminded that Ben is a hero, and that fancy thing on his wrist is just a gadget! And without Ben, a gadget is all it can ever be. Are there any more examples of this trope/concept you'd like to discuss? That's what the comment section is for, baby. Also remember to like and subscribe if you want this series to continue, because I'm gonna be honest, I really do. But like these three characters I covered today, I'm gonna need a little outside help to accomplish this. In the meantime, drink lots of water, I'll do the same. Hoko Quitton, hoping I made your day slightly better.